Hey YouTube, Tweak here, bringing you all an update to my Cyberse Code Talker Yu-Gi-Oh deck profile for post-Cyberstorm access. Cyberse monsters, the Code Talkers specifically, and the Firewall monsters were a big focus of the latest Yu-Gi-Oh booster set, Cyberstorm access, giving us cards to actually work with main deck Firewall monsters to summon out our new boss monster, Firewall Dragon Singularity. Makes for an awesome playstyle and probably one of my favorites for the Cyberse deck, being able to utilize the many different extra deck monsters, XYZ, Synchro, Fusion, and also main deck ritual monsters to gain additional card effects with Firewall Dragon Singularity. You can also run the many different other forms of Firewall Dragon as backup to this new Link 6 monster, along with the new main deck monsters we received as well. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So we will go ahead and start off with the main deck. For our new Firewall monsters, we are running 3 copies of the new Firewall Defensor. If this card is sent to the graveyard as link material for a Cyberse monster, you can special summon 1 Firewall monster from your deck except for Firewall Defensor. You cannot special summon monsters the turn you activate this effect except for Cyberse monsters. If a Firewall monster you control will be destroyed by a card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead, and you can only use each of the effects of Firewall Defensor once per turn. So depending on what Firewall monster you may have from your extra deck on the field, being able to protect it with Firewall Defensor from your graveyard just gives you a new banish effect to fully make use of, and another resource to summon out onto the field and set up for many of your other extra deck plays. Since we have to summon other Firewall monsters with Firewall Defensor after it's sent to the graveyard for link material, I am running 1 Firewall Guardian. This card was released in Dark Neostorm, so very usable as more of a protection card, but once again, it's just more of a target to summon out with Firewall Defensor, and one of the newer cards from the set being Firewall Phantom. If it's sent to the graveyard as link material for a Cyberse monster, you can add 1 Signet Spell or Trap from your deck to your hand, then discard 1 card, and you can banish this card from your graveyard during the end phase of this turn to shuffle 1 Cyberse monster from your graveyard into the deck. You can only use each effect of Firewall Phantom once per turn, so it allows you to recycle some of your other Cyberse cards that you may want to redraw again the following turn back into the deck, and giving you a Signet Search means you can add to your hand one of the many Signet cards, including Signet Codec and Signet Mining, to your hand. It does make you discard, so you may miss out on cards like Signet Mining if you don't have the cost to discard, since you have to discard on top of Firewall Phantom as well. That's why we're only running 1 copy of each of these. They are just cards that can be special summoned out with our more consistent searcher, Firewall Defensor, with them. For some of the other 3-ofs that we run in the deck as well, I also run 3 copies of Lady Debug, just having this card as an option to search out our coder monsters and then go for a link to summon with those coder monsters, because they can be then used as link material from the hand. 3 Lady Debug just gives us that search for those monsters as an added backup for our plays. So 3 of it for sure for the search power, and also 3 copies of Microcoder. Microcoder can either search out a monster if it's on the field or a Signet Spell or Trap when it's summoned, when you may use it to make a Code Talker monster, which you can use with the Lady Debug play like I mentioned before, because then you can just go for a link to Code Talker or a link to Code Talker inverted with both of those monsters as options to summon out with this card, and then having the additional search to set up cards like Signet Codec can just continue your Code Talker monster plays, because then you can summon out your Code Talker monster and then gain the additional search once Signet Codec is on the field for that different attribute. Also running 3 copies of Parallel Exceed, just when you summon a Link monster and being able to summon out Parallel Exceed to the field, making it a level 4 and then being able to summon another one can give you access to our Exceed play, which we run in the deck, which is our Prime Math Mech Alimbertion, and needing 2 or more level 4 monsters to gain additional effects depending on what we want to detach off this card can easily be set up with cards like Parallel Exceed, and then just having the additional summon of the 3rd copy, even though we've already gotten the 1 special summon. But you could also use cards like Firewall Phantom to shuffle that additional copy of Parallel Exceed from the graveyard back into the deck to reuse that last copy you may have also. I'm also running 2 copies of Math Mech Edition to go for a search power off of our Allen Burschen. Since we just need generic level 4 monsters, you could use the Allen Burschen to then search out the Math Mech Edition to then be able to target one face-on monster in the field. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn, except for Cyberse monsters. Also special summon this card from your hand, but it cannot attack this turn. And if you do, the targeted monster gains 1,000 attack until the end of this turn. So it's just an easy special summon and then boosting the attack of a monster on the field. Even if you don't use it for a summon, you will use it just as an additional special summon, and also for the fact that you can attack with it is no big deal. Also, it'll just be used to go into some of your bigger link plays. And also being a fire monster, if you have Cynet Codec on the field and you go for your Decode Talker Heat Soul, that could be the search needed to add Math Mech Edition to your hand. Also, 2 copies of Bouncer Lord, a light attribute monster that can be searched when you summon out your Code Talker Inverted, but also just giving you that additional normal summon by paying 1,000 life points. You can get another level 4 monster like Lady Debug on the field, and then that search can also be your overlay into your Prime Math Mech Allen Burschen if need be. I also run 2 copies of Cyberse Gadget. Now, the new ritual monster that we run in the main deck, Cyberse Sage, adds a lot of consistency for our synchro and fusion play since it's also a tuner, and you gain the additional search power if used for a fusion play, which allows you to being able to use this card as your fusion summon, which we'll get over and go over when we get to the ritual monster itself. But Cyberse Gadget being able to summon a level 2 or lower monster onto the field means we can also summon back Cyberse Sage after we properly ritual summon it onto the field, using this card as just an additional resource to either go for the fusion play if we wanted to use it to also go for the synchro play of cards like Cyberse Integrator. And then gaining the additional token off of the Cyberse Gadget is just an added bonus. For the last of the 2 ofs, I run 2 copies of Code Generator and Earth Attribute Monster, which can also be searched out with Cynet Codec when we make cards like Transcode Talker, and being able to set up the graveyard with more cards gives us more of a search power to rely on, depending on cards we may want to add back to our hand or use for any of our other plays. For some of the 1-ofs, I run 1 copy of Code Exporter, another code monster that can be used as a link material play from the hand. 1 Code Radiator, being able to reduce attack on the field. Code Exporter and Radiator being a wind and water attribute also help with the Codex searches. 1 Scriptron for an additional water attribute, but another easy special summon for a banish of a Cyberse monster from the graveyard. And also 1 Dotscaper, just when it's sent to the graveyard or banished, you each have the once per duel effect of each to summon Dotscaper back onto the field. So whether you banish it for Scriptron or even for just the setup in the graveyard, when set off of cards like Code Generator, you can get a special summon onto the field. With the last of the main deck monsters being 1 Cyberse Converter and 1 Backup Secretary. I like the Converter because it also helps to summon out the Cyberse Integrator, since our tuner monster, Cyberse Sage, is a level 1. So you can use Cyberse Converter and your Sage to then go into the level 3 Synchro monster, which I'm running over the Cyberse Quantum Dragon just as a more consistent synchro monster to make use of your special summon plays, and being another synchro monster to summon out. Now for the ritual monster, I am running the 1 copy of Cyberse Sage. Like I said, you can ritual summon this card with Cynet Ritual, which is your go-to ritual spell. And with this card, you can only use each of the following effects of Cyberse Sage once per turn. During your main phase, you can fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing fusion materials mentioned on it from your field and or graveyard, including a Cyberse monster. If this card is sent to the graveyard as a synchro material, you can target 1 Cyberse monster or 1 ritual spell in your graveyard, add it back to your hand, giving you recycle power for some of your other code monsters for you to reuse again for your link plays, but also being able to use this card when it's being able to fusion summon with this card using monsters from your graveyard or your field, including a Cyberse monster, means that you can go for the new fusion monster, which is Cyberse Davis Worm, needing 1 Cyberse Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, or Link monster, plus 1 Cyberse monster to make, so you can use Cyberse Sage to summon out that monster as well, and then meet the criteria needed for some of your bigger boss monsters like Firewall Singularity, having a fusion and a ritual already set up like that. That is it for the main deck monsters. Moving on to the spells, I run the 3 Cynet Codec. I went back to 3. I had this card at 1 before because it was a searcher, but it's a card that's, repeatedly destroyed by my opponent. It can easily be searched off the microcoder, but having 3 of in the deck gives you an additional, chance to open it up in your hand, and then you can use your microcoder to search out the 1 of Cynet optimization, which I'm also running. Along with the 3 Cynet codec, I also run the 3 copies of Cynet mining. This card just being able to search out a good majority of any of the cards we run on the deck, just being able to add Firewall Defensor to our hand, or if we already have Firewall Defensor, adding 1 of the coder monsters, and then having our link to play and search for our other Cynet spell, being all the easier, and graveyard setup depending on what card we sent to the graveyard from our hand off of this card. For some of the 1-ofs, I also run 1 copy of Cynet Optimization and also 1 Cynet Ritual. We get the additional normal summon with Cynet Optimization and Ritual, giving us a token setup, but also being the main go-to spell for our Ritual plays, are all 1-ofs because we can also search out Cynet Ritual thanks to our Cyber Switch, which just need 2 Cyberse monsters to summon out. For more of the generic spell lineup, I also run the 2 copies of World Legacy Succession for special summons just to a Link Zone on the field, and 1 Monster Reborn being a more generic way to summon anything we need from our graveyard back on the field for us to use. That is it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck. For the Code Talker monsters, for the Link 2s, I run 1 copy of Code Talker and 1 copy of Code Talker Inverted. They're the Dark and Light attribute Code Talker monsters we run in the deck. Now, the one I don't have in the extra deck that you can easily replace for another Link monster in the extra deck is Protect Code Talker. It helps with the Firewall Dragon setup, being able to summon back onto the field, continuing our Link plays being a Link 3 monster with a left, right, and up arrow to summon back onto the field, and also, like I said, counting as the light attribute, can help with the Cynet codec play of giving us additional searches thanks to our Code Talker monsters. For the Link 3 monsters I do have in the deck, the 1 X Code Talker, 1 Trans Code Talker, 1 Decode Talker Heat Soul, and the 1 Shooting Code Talker. If you wanted to mix around some of the numbers, you can either try taking out the Code Talker Inverted for the Protect Code. I still like this card as a Link 2 because it gives us the light option search while just using 2 monsters. You can try taking out Shooting Code Talker or X Code Talker, or you can try removing 1 of the bigger boss monster spots. It's a tough decision to put in for Protect Code Talker. You can mix around and see what you want, but I would replace just 1 of these monsters for that new Link 3 monster we got from Cyberstorm Access. I also run the 1 Cyber Switch. It's the Ritual Search for the spell and monster for Cyber Sage and Cynet Ritual. If a monster is special summoned to a zone this card points to, you can banish 1 spell from your graveyard to add 1 Cyberse Ritual monster and 1 Cynet Ritual from your deck to your hand. And if this card was activated this turn, you can target a level 4 or lower Cyberse monster in your graveyard and special summon it, giving you the setup needed for your Cyberse Sage. It is just a level 1 monster, so any monster you get can easily be used to use with the Cynet Ritual, since it doesn't have to equal exactly. So any monster from the main deck you summon out can easily be used to summon out your Cyber Sage. Also, 1 Splash Mage, easy special summon resources, just negating the effect of the monster we summon back onto the field, and also 1 of the Access Code Talker, a big finisher play just to summon out on the field, and then banish different attributes for our Link monsters from the graveyard to destroy a different card our opponent may have. For the Firewall monsters, I run 1 Firewall Dragon, 1 Firewall Dragon Dark Fluid Neo Tempest Terahertz, and the 1 of the new Firewall Dragon Singularity. With these 3 monsters, I don't have the original Dark Fluid. I put in Neo Tempest Terahertz as more of a graveyard setup card for the different attributes. For this card being able to send 1 Cyberse monster from your deck or extra deck to the graveyard, so you could potentially also send 1 of your other extra deck monsters, whether it be Synchro, Fusion, or Xyz, with this monster to the graveyard to set up for our Singularity. And you also have a Link 4, Link 5, and Link 6 available with all 3 of these monsters. And Firewall Dragon Singularity with its bounce power, depending on if you have a Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, or Xyz for each one in the graveyard, return them to the hand. And when it destroys a monster by battle that points to and sends it to the graveyard, and you can target a Cyberse monster in your graveyard and special summon it, getting back some of your bigger Code Talker monsters like Transcode just to be able to reuse again is a big part of why that play is awesome. And with easy link arrows to set up and point to your opponent's monsters as well. For the other extra deck monsters, I run the 1 Cyberse Integrator, the 1 Cyberse Davis Worm, and the 1 Prime Math Mech Alimbertian. The Davis Worm being the newest addition. During your main phase, you can special summon 1 Cyberse monster from your hand. Then you can make this card's level become that monster's, and when your opponent activates a spell or trap card effect, while you control a Link 4 or higher Cyberse monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard to negate the activation. So not only do you have the negated activation, you have the option to special summon a monster from your hand onto the field. So you can special summon a level 4 monster, making the Daysav Worm a level 4 as well, and then being able to overlay the two into your Primac Alimbertium, so easily setting up a play for your Xyz play. What's great about all these monsters is they all run together for being able to easily integrate each other into their own plays. You can use the integrator to get another Cyberse monster on the field, and if that monster is your Cyberse Sage, you can then use them to go into the fusion play of Davis Worm, and Davis Worm can go into your Primac Alimbertium. And as for some of the go-to plays in the deck, I already mentioned before with the Cyberse setup, if you get the 2 monsters needed, let's say you go for the additional search of your Signet Mining, setting up another monster in your graveyard, and then having the search of Bouncer Lord and one other monster onto the field, you can then either go for the Xyz play, or since you already have the spell in the graveyard, the Link 2 play of your Cyber Switch. And then with this card, all you need to do is special summon another monster to where this card points to, so you can use cards like your Mathmech Edition, the Parallel Exceed in your hand, whichever one, or even cards like Backup Secretary, summoning to the zone that this card points to. You can then banish the Cyberse spell that you activate as well to give you the search needed for your Cyber Sage, and then also the Signet Ritual. You can activate the Signet Ritual, then using your Mathmech Edition to summon out the Cyber Sage onto the field, and then being able to go for the additional fusion play using your 2 monsters like the Cyber Switch and the Cyber Sage to summon out your Cyberse Davis Worm onto the field. And then with your Daysav Worm, you have the play to special summon out an additional monster from your hand. If you summon out the Lady Debug off of this play, not only will you gain the additional search for one of your other monsters to add to your hand, you can then go for a search. It has to be a level 3 or lower, so remember that. You can get the Backup Secretary search, but then also being able to overlay the 2 together to then summon out your Xyz monster, and then using your Alimbertium can get you the additional setup for the detach of Alimbertium, detaching 2 to add a Mathmech card from your deck to your hand. So if you didn't activate the effect of Mathmech Edition, let's say you went for the summon of your Parallel Exceed, you can then use the additional addition play to summon this card onto the field, having the additional special summon of the Backup Secretary, giving you 3 monsters on the field with that play. You have a Ritual, Fusion, and then going into the Link 3 play to summon out the additional monster of your Transcode Talker on the field. You will then have the activate effect of Transcode to summon Cyber Switch back onto the field, and if you summoned off the Parallel Exceed off the additional play of Cyber Switch, when it was Link summoned, you'll gain the additional Parallel Exceed, which was already on the field, being able to use then the Link 3 Transcode Talker, the Cyber Switch, and the Parallel Exceed to summon out your Firewall Dragon Singularity, which will then also already have set up in the graveyard 3 monsters to gain with its additional bounce to send cards from your opponent's field back to their hand, and then depending on where you set up this monster, a monster that can attack, and then special summon back another Cyberse monster from your graveyard onto the field. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed. Once again, it's an awesome edition. We got some pretty great support in the Cyberstorm Access Pack, including the new Ritual, the new Fusion, just a bunch of cards to really help with the overall play style of one of my favorite versions of the Cyberse Code Talker deck. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.